BS with Bob Schmidt on today's Talk 1490. My guest this time around, special guest, Tommy Roe. You may remember a lot of his songs from the day. Dizzy, Sweet Pea, Sheila, Hooray for Hazel, Heather Honey. Actually, after listening off a lot of those names there, Tommy, a lot of them are women's names. Did you have some issues with women back in the day?
Listen, man, it worked for me, so I kept doing it,
So did you date?
The first one, after Sheila, I said, hey, man, that's good. A million seller #1. Maybe I can do that again with Susie Darlin.
And so, did you know women by the names of your songs?
No, actually, Sheila is a song that I wrote when I was 14 years old, and originally it was a poem. I used to write these little poems, and I wrote this poem about a girl I had a crush on going into high school. Her name was Frida. So it was originally Sweet Little Frida, if you see her, blue eyes and a ponytail.
Right.
And then I got a chance to audition for a record producer, and I sang Frida for him. He said, Tommy, I love that song Frida, but we got to change the title. We can't use Frida for the title. We got to get a more commercial name. So we changed it to Sheila.
Really? So you wrote a poem when you were 14, ended up being able to record it and make it into a million selling record. How did you feel after that? It's something that you just kind of wrote in, for a girl, and all of a sudden it's really worth some cash.
It seems like it was just my destiny, because I used to write these little poems and silly little, not certainly wasn't a work of art, but about the same time my dad taught me 3 chords on the guitar, and that was enough to write a song with. So I started writing songs, and it was just something that I enjoyed doing, and I still do to this day. I mean, I have a brand new record out right now called Just Your Kind of Song, which is a new song I wrote. Actually, we don't make records anymore. We make digital files.
Right.
And we upload them to the cloud.
Well, yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was talking to, we have 5 radio stations here, and I asked one of the guys from our oldie station, I said, so if you had a chance to ask Tommy Roe a question, what would that be? And he goes, well, how does he listen to music now? Are you still old school and like the old albums? Are you 8 tracks?
Well, I listen just like everybody else does. I listen on the internet, and I listen in the car and the radio. But I bought a turntable recently where you can transfer your records to digital files. But with Bluetooth. I mean, the technology is incredible today. What you can do.
Right.
So I've transferred most of my albums over to digital files, the original albums. And I enjoy doing that. I enjoy the technology. And, it's funny how I record this new record. The musicians are in Nashville. I'm in Los Angeles, and the producer is in Napa Valley. And we record that way. We do the tracks over the internet, and the musicians are in Nashville. It's just like being in the studio, but I'm looking at them instead of through the window on my computer,
Really?
And that's how we recorded this new single I have out. They send me the track. I put my vocal on at my studio here in Los Angeles, and then mix it down and upload it, to iTunes.
That's amazing. Could you imagine if that's the way it was in the 50s and 60s?
Oh, it's so good. I mean, it's like when we recorded Everybody in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. That was recorded to just 1/4-inch tape. I mean, we walked out of the studio with the record under our arm. You didn't have to mix it or anything. You just go to the radio station and they put it on the air.
Uh-huh.
It's like a totally different ball game.
Tommy, is it harder to get airplay from radio stations now than it was back in the 50s and 60s?
It is, because radio now is so splintered, and it's also controlled by just a few programmers. I mean, I think it's just, you can count them on one hand, the programmers that program all the radio in the United States. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to get airplay, and it's very difficult to find a niche for yourself. I mean, I've tried to make some country records, but I think they still look at me as a bubblegum singer. Maybe if I chewed tobacco instead of bubblegum, I might be successful.
Wear a hat, knock out a couple of teeth. We'll call it good. Carry a gun. You got it good. So
that's right. Yeah. Drive a pickup truck, have some hay in the back of it. But you have to find a niche for yourself, and the oldies stations won't play any of your new records. They strictly play the oldies music.
Right.
So it's tough for a guy like me, but I still do it because I love it. I love making records, and I love the technology, like I said. upload them, and they sell. You know, on iTunes they sell, and they play them on Spotify and Apple Music, and so that's how people get their music today.
Absolutely. Tommy Roe's my guest. I remember Tommy Roe from back in the day. Remember the song Busy and Sweet Pea, and so let me ask you this. So what are you classified now then? Are you classified as top 40 or pop or adult contemporary or classic? I mean,
I think probably adult contemporary. When I send a record out, I send it to country stations and adult contemporary. And they have another name. It's called Americana.
Okay.
And I'm not really sure what that is, but I send it to those as well.
Right.
And they have a service that sends your digital tracks out to all the stations, and they can download the wave track, and play it on their air. So that's how they do it.
Well, I just thought it was kind of cool because I grew up in the. I graduated high school 30 years ago, so I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I remember listening to oldies in the car all the time with my folks. And I remember your songs. I remember Dizzy. I remember Sweet Pea. I remember Sheila.
Sure.
I could sing along with those songs to this day.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing even my kids could, Tommy. And my kids are late teens, mid to late teens, and I got a 22-year-old,
right.
and I'm guessing that they know your songs as well. Is it pretty cool for you? As because I'm sure you're my kids' grandpa, you're my parents' age. So is it cool to see like kids that are your grandchildren's age that don't know who Tommy Roe is, but they know Tommy Roe's songs?
Yeah, it's interesting. They kind of hold up with the new generation. It's funny. My granddaughter calls me the Justin Bieber of the '60s. So that's how she relates to me.
I hope you're not. I hope you're not as big of an ass as he is.
That's how the kids can. When they hear the name Tommy Roe, they'll just think of Justin,
So I know you're from Atlanta, right?
Right, I'm from Atlanta. Yeah.
So what's your favorite thing to drink?
Well, I drink martinis.
Oh, okay.
And I martini with olive. And somebody asked me recently, "What do you do to relax?" I said, I make a martini with olives, and I listen to Christmas music.
Really? You know what? Honest to God, I love. Because I do talk radio in the mornings. I do during the middays. I do a classic rock show, and when I want to relax on like a Sunday morning, reading the paper or whatever, I am the same way. I throw in like the old school Christmas stuff, like the Nat King Cole and the
That's
Dean
right.
Martin
That's
and
what
stuff.
I listen to.
And it's funny because
I have it on my phone. Actually, I play it in the car.
Really, my wife looks at me like, "You're not even a Christmas fan." I said, "I know, but I just love the music. It just kind of brings me, it kind of brings me there."
Very relaxing, yeah.
It's
especially when you're in the Los Angeles traffic out here, you have to relax.
Oh, I could not imagine. I couldn't even imagine. The reason I asked about what your favorite drink was because I thought most people from Atlanta would say Coke, and then I was
I do drink. I have Cokes in the refrigerator, but I don't buy them in the can. I buy the small bottles, like the original bottles of Coke.
Yeah, the old 6-ounces or whatever they are.
That way. Yeah, that way you don't drink too much of it, because it's really not good to drink a lot of Coca-Cola, although it's a great product.
Right.
But you just drink a little of it, it's not going to hurt you, So I buy the small bottles, and they're always in my refrigerator.
Okay, well, then I was going to ask the question, because we call it either pop or soda here, because we're right on the border, border of Minnesota and Wisconsin. Wisconsin calls it soda, and when I grew up in the Twin Cities, it was called pop. But I've asked that as a question on my radio show before, and people said that people in Atlanta call everything Coke. So if somebody were to get a Mountain Dew or something, they'd ask for a Coke. So how do you ask for a Mountain Dew? Do you say Mountain Dew Coke?
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's the old school folks in Atlanta, like my dad, God bless him, if he was still here, he used to call it Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
It wasn't even Coca-Cola; it was Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
I'll have a Coca-Cola. And we used to, when I was a kid, we used to put Planters peanut in the Coke, and we'd drink the Coke and eat the peanuts out of the bottle. I mean, that was the thing we did. It was just like everybody did it.
Yeah, my dad did that too. It was the Spanish peanuts, the ones with the skin on them, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Man, Tommy, you and I, we've got a lot in common for being different age groups.
Well, couple of rednecks, admitted rednecks.
Maybe that's what it is. I also see you have a book, Cabbage Town to Tinseltown. What is that all about?
I do. Yeah, it's I've had this in the back of my mind for about 5 years, and I hooked up with my co-writer, Michael Krikorian, about 3 years ago, so we really buckled down and finished it. And I'm really proud of it. It's from Cabbagetown to Tinseltown, and it can be ordered on my website for autographed copies, TommyRowe.com. And, of course, it's in Amazon. It's in all the bookstore platforms on the Internet. But what I tried to do is, if you like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you won't like my book, because this is not where I was coming from. That's all been written about, and there's not much I could add to it. But what I tried to do was parallel the influence of music in the 60s on our culture and politics and fashion and everything, because music of the 60s really turned our culture upside down, and we're still influenced by that same upside-down act of the 60s today. I mean, we're still living in the results of that today. So that's what I tried to do with the book, and of course, I talk about the people along the way that helps me, and the artists I've worked with and things like this. But it's kind of to show how music has really influenced everything.
Okay. You kind of stole my next question. I was going to ask about if music was about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So, what was it about that, or was that just a myth?
Well, I think it was all part of what went on back then. I mean, you think about it. That's another thing. There was no AIDS or anything like that back in those days. So, I mean, people kind of felt free to have sex if they wanted to have sex,
Right.
There wasn't anything to really fear about it. It was part of life, But today, it's a whole different thing. And that was really part of the change as well. What happened, that all came from the 60s, the evolution of the 60s, the open culture and the open marriages and all this stuff that went on.
Mm-hmm.
So, the 60s was a big turnaround for our country, and because of the British invasion and the British influence of music around the world, it turned out to be, because of the Beatles, a transition for the whole world, especially the Western world.
Right. Did you ever get a chance to play with the Beatles or the Stones or any of those guys?
Well, you probably haven't heard the story, but the first tour I did in England was Chris Montez and I were headlining the tour, and the Beatles were a featured act on our tour.
Are you kidding? So that's awesome.
1963, yeah. I mean, on my website, you can see all the photos of me and the Beatles and when we toured together. And I haven't. Then when they came to do the Ed Sullivan Show, they invited me to open the show for them in Washington, D.C. on February 11th, 1964. That was their first American concert, and I opened the show for them on that.
Wow.
So, yeah. And, you think about it, the Beatles' early tunes, they call a lot of my music bubblegum music. But if you think about their early songs like I Want to Hold Your Hand, Please Please Me, Love Me Do, that was really the blueprint for bubblegum music. Because, I mean, what's the difference in those songs and Oh Sweet Pea, Come On and Dance With Me? I mean, It's the same, little lighthearted love songs,
But I think that honestly that's kind of the way that genre or that time frame of music really was compared to I mean if you look at maybe like the 70s and stuff with the start of Kiss and with
right.
Queen and those guys, and then the 90s with Nirvana, they all kind of had that same song, that same sound, and now with music that you can't even understand, so you kind of it kind of goes through phases. Don't you think?
It does. About every decade it changes. But I tell you something that I honestly believe. I don't think the way that we have media today, the way it is, everything is so, I mean, you can just see everything around the world on your cell phone.
Right.
I don't think it's possible to have another phenomenon like the Beatles or Michael Jackson or Elvis Presley because of that.
Right.
Because it's not that big of a deal. You know what I'm saying? Back in the days when you had very little media, Elvis was a big deal because you only got a little taste of it here and there.
Right.
But today, you see it all. It's all out on the table, and you're just overloaded with it. So it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
The kids today don't think it's a big deal. They don't even think music is a big deal. That's why they steal it.
I'm actually glad you brought that up too. What about because back when you first started, very rarely did somebody have a cassette deck, I'm guessing. And nowadays, everybody can, like you said, steal. Everybody can take music off of Spotify or off of Pandora or listen to it on the internet and not buy an album. Would you, if you were to start today, Tommy? Do you think that you would have made a good living?
Oh, they make a fortune today.
Oh,
the way they make their money? The way they make their money, though, is through their performances, their concerts. I mean, they sell merchandise. Some of these acts make more money with merchandise than they do with their concerts. I mean, they make tons of money, more than I ever did. But as far as the records, well, we don't, like I say, we don't make records anymore. I mean, they're digital files, and they can be passed around from one person to another. And with Spotify and now Apple Music, you don't even have to download a song. I mean, iTunes there aren't many songs being downloaded anymore for 99 cents.
Right.
Because you can listen to them for a subscription on Spotify, and you don't get paid. You get paid very little for those airplays on Spotify and Apple. So I was reading Billy Joel was saying something about, he had one of his records, he got like 6 million airplays or something on one of his records, and he said he got a check for like $200 and something, and he was very upset about that.
Yeah.
And I don't blame him. I mean, I got one. I got one recently. Dizzy got over 1 million airplays, and I got a check for like $120 or something like that.
So you went out for 3 martinis and a steak, and you're overcharged.
Yeah, and listen to Christmas music. I mean, that's my only. My only option.
That's pretty sad. So, all right. So, if somebody let's say I went now and I went and downloaded, 3 of your songs, and I paid $1.29 each, or 99. Let's just say 99 cents.
Right.
How much of that do you see? Do you see any of it?
Well, you get quite a bit when that happens. I mean, you get more than half of it. But there's very few people doing that now. I mean, because they're listening to streaming. They're streaming their music instead of downloading it. They don't want to own anything anymore. They want to, just have it when they want it, and it's not a commodity anymore. It's just out there in the air. So.
Right. Do you find media? You talked about media earlier, Tommy. Is it different for you to be interviewing with me today in 2017 than it was to be interviewing with Wolfman Jack or whatever back in the 60s? I mean, was it a much bigger deal back in those days?
Yeah, it's different because of what we're discussing now. Wolfman Jack wouldn't even understand streaming. He would be talking about the records only. I mean, that would be what he would discuss. But yes, today there's so much more to talk about in our industry. The changes our industry has gone through is just phenomenal. And there's still money to be made in the business, but it's being made in different ways than it used to be made. And of course, back when I was doing it, it was like baseball players. Like, I think Mickey Mantle, the most he ever made a year was like $600,000, right?
Right.
One of the greatest baseball players of all time. And today, these guys get $6 million for a year, or even more than that, $20 million.
Right. Or remember, I mean, hell, you look at the TV show $6 Million Man, where it was like they rebuilt this guy for $6 million, and he was all this and more. And now these guys are getting paid that to catch a ball and throw it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it was the same for music. I mean, we made good money relative to the value of the dollar during the '60s.
Right.
We made good money, but compared to today, it was like peanuts. I have actually made more money with my investments than I have in the music business. And the music business, of course, afforded me the stipend to make those investments, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate my fans for loving my music. But, as far as my investments go, I've done much better with those, real estate and stocks and all that,
Well, you were one of the smart ones, it sounds like, because I know a lot of these guys that were in the same genre as you, they blew all their money. They live fast, die hard, you know what I mean? And end up penniless and broke.
I saw a lot of my friends go through that, and drugs, and all that. I was fortunate enough to not get involved in heavy drugs as well. So,
right.
I love to drink. I drink my wine and, like I said, my martini. But that's it for me. That's my vice.
Well, if I ever meet you, I'll have a beer. You can have a martini. We can sit around and BS.
There we go.
I enjoyed this conversation. I do have one last question. I know that you're short on time here, but was there ever any jealousy between like you said that the Beatles were featured when you toured back before they made it big? Was there any jealousy that they ended up making it so large?
Not really, because I managed to do very well through the 60s. And I think the one reason I was able to compete with the Beatles and all the other great music that was coming from England was because I was able to write my own songs. The artists that couldn't write were pushed off the charts, and they never recovered from it.
Right.
But, when I was in the Army in 1964, I wrote Sweet Pea, and, when I got out, I recorded it, and my whole point was to write something different than what was on the air at the time. And I call it soft rock, which turned into bubblegum music. But,
right.
That was my whole vision, to do something so different. And radio loved Sweet Pea because it was safe. And, back in those days, you had a lot of songs that radio wouldn't play. They wouldn't play anything over 3 minutes, and anything that was protest or about the Vietnam War, they were reluctant to play that as well.
Right.
So
and that's all.
My songs were safe, and they really, the DJs loved that.
Right. That's what classic rock is. All those songs nowadays. The war protest songs. So it was Dizzy about your first time drinking a martini?
I never thought about that, but probably was. Who knows? That was the first song I wrote with my friend Freddie Weller, who was from Atlanta. I was on Where the Action Is, Dick Clark's Where the Action Is, and Paul Revere and the Raiders. I used to tour with them a lot, and Paul lost his guitar player, so he asked me if I knew somebody. I suggested Freddie, and Freddie came out and auditioned and got the gig. So we started touring together, and we were on a bus one night driving. We had a long haul to the next gig, and we were driving all night to the next city. And Freddie and I were sitting, couldn't go to sleep on the bus, so we wrote. That's when we wrote Dizzy, driving that night on the bus. And that turned out, I tell you, that was the only song I recorded that when I left the studio, I knew it was a hit. All the others, I felt like I should have done this, or I could have sang that better, maybe we should have added a guitar here or there. But when I left the studio with Dizzy, I said, this is a hit record. And boy, it was an immediate hit. I mean, as soon as it got played on the air, it just went up the charts like crazy.
Yeah, that's a great song. That when I first saw your name on the email, Tommy, I'm like, oh, Dizzy, yeah, I know, And actually, as we're talking, Tommy, your songs are like playing through my head right now, and so I appreciate the walk down memory lane, even though I'm only 48 years old. I remember, these songs are like my childhood up through today, which is fantastic. And
I appreciate that.
Final question: Why do you go by Tommy rather than Tom?
Well, my name is Thomas, and after 9/11, I had to start using Thomas on my passport. They wouldn't take, Tommy. They want your real name. So I use Thomas. All my business stuff is Thomas. But, I'm stuck with Tommy for the record business or the music business. That's who I am,
Right. Well, I thought maybe you went by Tom when you were a kid, and, you thought, well, a good way to sell records would be Tommy.
Yeah, I've always been Tommy. My dad was Thomas.
Okay.
So he wouldn't allow me to be called Thomas.
Are you a junior?
No, not a junior. Just they named me after my dad. And my grandson, or my great grandson, is named Thomas. He's named after my dad and myself.
Really, that's cool.
I have 3 great grandchildren.
Wow.
Three grandchildren, 3 great grandchildren.
That's fantastic. How many kids do you have?
2 daughters.
2 daughters. Awesome. Hey,
Thanks. But where are you located?
La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Oh, La Crosse. Oh, I love Wisconsin. Yeah, I talk about Wisconsin in my book. Actually, there's a funny bit in there. I was doing a show at the Wisconsin State Fair one year, and this drunk guy, this cheesehead drunk guy, kept coming up to the stage and asking me to play something by ZZ Top. I said, "Hey, man, you found the wrong tent. This is bubblegum music." That's a funny story.
You should have gone into She's Got Legs.
Many times.
Yeah.
Many times. Great people.
Yeah, I moved here 25 years ago, thinking I'll be here for a couple of years, and found a home, and here I am, still in the same spot. Tommy, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your time today. TommyRoe.com, TommyRoe.com. Anything that we're missing at all? Any words of advice as we finish the conversation?
Words of advice. I'm not good on giving advice. I take it very well, though. So maybe if I can give me some advice. But just stay in tune with Tommy Roe. Just go to the website, TommyRoe.com. It's got most all the information about the book. You can order the book. There are autographed copies from my website, TommyRoe.com. And of course, the single you can get on iTunes and Amazon, all the platforms.
Very good. Yeah, download it so that way Tommy makes a couple cents off it.
Yeah, I need $1 for a martini.
Hey, Tommy, I appreciate the conversation today. Have a super day, and thanks again. Good luck with the sale of the book and with the sale of your singles.